What do you get when you have a slow burn horror film with a very eerie aesthetic about a serial killer who murders entire families while leaving behind zero evidence other than Zodiac-styled ciphers? But 40 minutes into the movie, it loses its footing and begins sliding down a mountain at Mach 10 and puts this evasive serial killer front and center. By the way, the serial killer is Nicolas Cage, and instead of being spooky or scary, he ends up acting like an alcoholic, washed up 80s has-been rock star.
It seems I wore my long legs today. What happens if
Longlegs. I went into the movie without any spoilers. I knew almost nothing about it other than, hey, it's a horror movie and people like it. I did hear before watching it that the movie was very polarizing for some people. Anyway, I was finally able to sit down and watch Longlegs and actually put down my thoughts about the movie, and I was absolutely enthralled by it for probably the first 40 minutes, but that falling down the mountain analogy is exactly how I felt at about the midpoint. If you've never seen any of my videos, this is the part where I have to give a spoiler warning. I'm going to discuss the entire film, the whole plot, everything that happens, more or less. So if you don't want to see a random guy on the internet discuss this movie and would rather watch it for yourself, go check it out and then come back if you want to. Let's get started. Longlegs starts with an interesting scene shot in 4:3 aspect ratio, which is, I don't know if you know the box, and it has rounded edges like movies back in the 1970s. This happens in the film kind of frequently with flashbacks, and I liked it in the beginning. It kind of adds to the aesthetic of this first half as well. Anyway, the opening is a bit odd. Nothing in it feels right. It's very eerie. It starts out with a station wagon driving down the road, and the camera is kind of positioned in the front seat, just looking out the window. It's very reminiscent of 1970s horror movies, where you just have a shot being positioned looking somewhere, and it's traveling fast, and you're like, oh, that's the killer or something. I don't know why they did that, but that's how I always took it. This station wagon is pulling up an isolated driveway to a little bitty farmhouse. The perspective flips to a little girl inside of the house. She's looking out the window, and that's where we see the station wagon stop. She goes downstairs and puts on a coat and goes outside. The atmosphere out the gate here is super creepy, whether it be the music adding a lot to it or just the way that it's filmed. The tension is broken, though, when a strange figure peering from behind the house says, "Cuckoo!" She follows what we can just make out to be a weird guy into the backyard and is greeted by an absolute freak, Longlegs, which of course we don't learn that till later on, but we can always assume. In the intro, I couldn't tell who was playing Longlegs. It wasn't until an hour into the movie that I realized it was Nicolas Cage. So at this point in the movie, I'm still fucking like, yeah, let's keep going. This is cool. I do really like the way this intro is done and how it switches back into normal aspect ratio after. I like the credits. The intro song, it at least makes the movie feel different, which is a good thing today. Anyway, in the modern day, or at least the modern setting of the movie, we get to meet our main character, FBI agent Lee Harker. We can immediately tell that she's a very awkward, kind of weird girl, weird character, and we can expect her to act this way the entire movie. I don't fully understand this next section of the movie, even after watching the movie a couple times. I'll try to explain it to the best of my ability, but I'm kind of stupid, I guess. So in this intro, Lee is getting a rundown with the other FBI agents about this guy that they're trying to catch. They're like going to go door to door through these neighborhoods until they find his house. Yeah, the movie then cuts to Lee and this other FBI agent stopping, where they're about to get out and knock on doors, when Lee has this almost clairvoyant ability being like, this is the house. I know it. I know this is the house. As it turns out, she was very right, too, because when the FBI agent knocks on the door, and she follows up behind him, we can see her from her point of view when the door gets opened. The guy gets his face blasted off. She goes inside, and it's a weird house full of a bunch of plastic hanging everywhere, makes her way upstairs and finds this creepy guy. The movie then immediately cuts to a different scene where she's being tested for her clairvoyant abilities. So I'm assuming because she got this right, now the feds are trying to figure out if she's a clairvoyant and can help them in a more difficult case. After Lee passes this clairvoyance test, she goes and meets with the head detective, or I don't know what you'd call him, but he's kind of the boss, and another FBI agent, and this is when they give her the rundown of the case that's the main focus of this film. This is actually the part of the movie that got me kind of hooked, because the idea is very intriguing and just weird. Let me explain. Over the course of the past 30 years or so, there have been 34 or 40 murders of families, And the circumstances in which these families were slain is very unexplainable. As they put it for the first one they're talking about, which they just happen to be parked outside the house where it happened, they have a family whose father grabbed an axe and slashed up his entire family, just hacked them away, stabbed the mother like 64 times until the knife handle broke off. That was really... They always say stuff like that. Well, then he was able to take some, like a knife or a machete to himself and did it to himself afterwards. Well, people would just think that this was just a murder S-word, but there was a note left behind with this cryptic writing, a cipher, and it's signed or pinned by Longlegs. Now, for all 34 of these murders, these are the notes that they've been finding, so they know they're all related because of the note. The FBI is wondering how it's possible because even though there's a note in the house, there's no other evidence that a killer or murderer was in the house or ever around, and the family did it to each other, like they killed each other. Was he able to talk them into doing it, or is it something more supernatural? So the reason I get pulled in is we have a cool mystery. I like mysteries and thrillers, especially with some strange horror elements like this one would have, because this almost sounds paranormal, as I said. Maybe a demon figure or satanic cult, I don't know. So after getting a rundown, they head back to the FBI building. Headquarters, I don't know. And we see a picture of Bill Clinton on the wall, which made me figure out, hey, this movie is set in the 90s. There's another moment throughout the movie where you meet another family who's like being murdered by each other, where we see a picture of Nixon on the wall. So they're like, hey, this doesn't take place in 2020, brother. It's actually this time period. Lee and the head FBI agent go over all the different killings. He's kind of given her just a long rundown on all of them. The only thing in common other than the note throughout all of these killings is, strangely enough, all of the daughters in the family, they all had daughters, and they were born on the 14th of any given month. Lee ends up taking all this and going over it on her own, and we get flashing imagery of all the brutality, and it's pretty brutal. I, of course, can't show any of it on YouTube. After Lee looks it over with her weird clairvoyance, putting stuff together, looking at the ciphers and such, the FBI agent's like, hey, why don't we go to the bar? They talk about it some more out at a bar, and then he asks her to take him home. When they get to his house, he insists that she goes inside and meets his family. I thought this was just meant to show how awkward Lee is, because in this situation, she is insufferably awkward around his family.
Hello.
Oh, hey, this is Agent Lee Harker. Harker?
Hi, honey.
Hey, hey.
I'm glad you're home. Do you want to see my room?
This is actually an important part of the movie because it plays into the ending. I'm sure there are a lot of random things throughout all these scenes that should stick out that I missed throughout the movie and didn't catch while watching it over again. I can't be asked though because of how this movie trails off. I'm just kind of done with it now. I just want to talk about it. Anyway, Lee decides to go into the detective's daughter's room and she's like, hey, it's my birthday coming up. Do you want to come to my birthday party? And Lee's like, okay, I guess I'll do it. After Lee promises to go to the little girl's birthday party, the movie doesn't let up with this awkwardness, but it does so instead with a lot of very unsettling, just long, drawn-out shots at like doorways or empty fields with trees. It's one of my favorite aspects about this movie. The director really knows what he's doing. I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the sound, so whoever made the music for this movie probably deserves a lot of credit. Overall, the beginning parts of this movie are just very, very slow burn. When Lee goes home, the movie quite honestly hits its peak, in my opinion, making me think I was about to sit down and experience a very unsettling mystery, horror, detective thriller. When Lee gets to her house, we realize that she lives in a cabin-styled home that very obviously doesn't have any neighbors within at least eyesight, making us feel very isolated. We get a very long shot of her opening the door and coming inside, where it just kind of holds on to the door after she walks away. She then goes and sits down at her desk and starts looking over all the crime scene evidence that she's seen throughout the day, but gets a phone call from her mother. So Lee's in the left side of the screen and she's taking up probably like a third of the shot, and then the other 2/3 of the shot are just focused on the door behind her that goes into her really dark kitchen. I don't think anything actually happens in the background during this, after watching it a few times, but it is very spooky. I know it's not actually like, oh my god, I'm really scared. I just like this way of filmmaking because it just builds and builds and builds. Whenever you decide to actually cut the tension from something like this, it's probably going to be an extremely effective scare. Not to mention that the conversation that Lee is having with her mother makes you understand how isolated Lee as a character is. Like, she's not even close to her own mother. She's not close to anyone at work. Putting ourselves in her shoes, since she's our main character and who we're kind of looking at this all through. This is really, really just, I can't give this movie in the beginning of it more positivity. I really, really like it. Of course, we have horror movie characters who make horror movie decisions, so it gets a little muddy when Lee sees something outside and runs out after it, leaving her door wide open. When she's out there, she doesn't see whatever it is anymore. I don't know what it was. Maybe like a kid, a woman outside. I don't know. Demon. But guess what? There's somebody inside of her house. When she runs back inside, the person that was in there is gone, and you're like, oh my god, look around, what the hell? But there is a singular letter left behind. Guess what that letter is? Well, it's a cipher letter from Longlegs, penned by him, and the ink is still wet. Unlike the others, she actually finds a way to crack this one. So the movie follows Lee spending the night cracking it, I think with the Bible. I don't know what this shadow was supposed to signify, but it is kind of spooky after seeing the whole movie, since I'm here talking about it afterwards. There's a lot of satanic and paranormal stuff strewn throughout this movie, so maybe Lee enters a paranormal state when she's doing her clairvoyance. I don't know, I don't get it. Maybe Longlegs is able to be ethereal? None of it ever gets a breakdown or an explanation, though, so I'm just completely unsure about what this stuff she sees is. Anyway, Lee gets another call the next morning where she's like spent all night cracking this code, and it's another murder. Another family killed and another note left behind. At this crime scene, the movie's still building towards this just really interesting, like, detective kind of thriller. The bodies have been there for like a couple months, so it's really disgusting when they enter in there. I like the way the characters talk to each other, because we're still like, everybody in this entire movie is just so cold to each other, and I really like how this is all done. It reminds me of like a really good, like, detective show you'd see on TV. I just wish it stayed this way. So, on the last cipher that she got, which was delivered to her at her home, she used the Bible to crack. Well, this cipher that was left behind at the home where these people were just murdered, she goes to a library at maybe an FBI place, I'm not sure where she's at, and she uses Dante's 9 Circles of Hell, Inferno? I don't know what it's called. What happens during this scene is probably more interesting than her just cracking this code, though. While she's sitting there cracking it, you can see outside the window of the library this, I can only describe it as like Satan. It's a goat-like figure outside, a goat man. I don't think that there was actually a demon outside, though. I think this gives credence to the idea that perhaps when she enters this psychic kind of state, she gets a little close to the weird paranormal world. Creepy nonetheless, but sadly, this is where the movie starts to change for the worse. She goes to her boss the next day, tells him everything she's learned cracking these codes. They begin looking into some old cases, and this leads them to going to check out an old house where this happened. They search around for a bit. There's still these, like, decent spooky shots. I like the way the movie's filmed. That's not a complaint of mine. But they go to the barn. Upstairs in the barn, there's this hatch that has like a crucifix on it. They open the hatch up and they find a really strange doll up there. I don't know why somebody would put a doll in a hidden compartment with a crucifix over the top of it. I do want to add that the religious iconography in this movie is everywhere, like all over the place, and I like it. It adds for some interesting storytelling for what could normally be just a detective horror movie. I was actually genuinely excited to see where this movie would go with the satanic route. I was wondering what the hell was going on. Anyway, Lee and her boss take this doll to a forensic pathologist, I think they're called. I don't know why you'd take a doll to a forensic pathologist. Gets cut open and he finds a metallic ball, like a strange metallic ball inside of its head. Lee zones out there, like she does a million times throughout this movie, and it decides to show snakes on the screen, and I can't fucking stand snakes. I hate snakes, absolutely hate them. I get why they do it with the satanic stuff, though, because Garden of Eden and such. But, yeah, snakes, no thanks, no thanks. Don't like them. And also flashing imagery and loud noises, but you add snakes to it and I just really hate it. If you're not afraid of snakes, I don't see any chance that you'd be afraid of the flashing imagery. They have no clue what this metallic ball is, so moving on. The movie transitions back into an old-timey aspect ratio, And we see some creepy guy, looks like the guy from the beginning, kind of assembling this doll, putting it together. The movie then does its transition where it widens out into our normal aspect ratio, and we see Longlegs, the creep, up close and personal, going to a convenience store or a general store, acting very bizarre. This continues when he goes up to a little girl at the register and acts like an absolute freak. I don't know a better way to explain it. I'll show you.
Daddy! That gross guy is back again!
As I've said, it's not even that he's actually like creepy, but he really reminds me of like a washed up, drug addicted, like rock star who's way past his prime. Like, imagine somebody worse off than Ozzy Osbourne. I think his is more Parkinson. But anyway, let's talk about seeing this guy up close and personal. The movie decides halfway through to just kill the suspense and mystery by having us follow along with the murderer, the guy that they're looking for. Now there's no more mystery. We know who he is. I really don't like that part of this movie. I didn't even know that he was Nicolas Cage yet. Before, mind you, he was practically a paranormal, like, Satanist. We didn't know what it was. Longlegs could have not even been a human. He could have been something else entirely. But now we just get to figure out that he's Nicolas Cage in a fucking costume. They investigate more into this house and barn where they found the doll. And they figured out one person survived the slaughter, and it was actually the daughter. They go and meet her at a psych ward, because of course she's there, her whole family was slaughtered, and she's the one that found them. From there, we can tell that the doll was made to be identical looking to the girl in the psych ward. She acts pretty crazy in the psych ward, of course. What do you expect from somebody in a psych ward? But it makes sense when you learn that she was actually just in a catatonic state for like a decade, until yesterday, when they found the doll. She says a bunch of really weird shit that I'm assuming has quite a bit of meaning in the movie. Like, oh, it's like weird cryptic things to Lee Harker, like how does she remember hers or whatever. We kind of get an idea that Lee Harker is much more tied into this than we thought, i.e., she has one of these creepy dolls made after her. This causes Lee to head home and go talk to her mother. When she arrives home, we notice that the house is the same exact one from the intro, so we can assume that that little girl is probably Lee when she was a kid. The black sheet in the car wasn't a demon, but was probably a doll, meant to look exactly like Lee. While there, Lee has pretty long conversation with her mother. It's just really, really awkward. Her mom is very, very freaky. I think that Lee's mom is one of the better parts of the movie because, like, at least in this middle aspect, like middle part. While Lee's talking to her mom, we learn a whole hell of a lot about her past. She was born on the 14th, like the other victims. And her mom says that she doesn't remember Lee's 9th birthday whatsoever, ever. And neither does Lee, which leaves a weird, wide open, what the hell happened to us? Longlegs tried to kill us? At this point, I was not really digging the way that the story was going, but it wasn't completely bad yet. I also do like how awkward the conversations and people are. I gotta get a lot of credit. This movie feels so weird. It reminds me of Hereditary and how weird the family was to each other after the... I don't want to spoil Hereditary. But after the bad thing happens, not very often do you get these like really awkward movies. I guess that's all Ari Aster does, though, so maybe this is overdone. While Lee's at home, we see her find an old box in her bedroom. The movie transitions to her in her actual home, kind of digging through the box. We then see more of Longlegs. It's not any better. The whole drunken drug addict, burned out rock star just throws me out of the movie so much. We see him walking with some luggage to a bus stop. The cops just come in and arrest him. We then go to the department and watch him get questioned. So now they've already caught the killer. This leads to one of my least favorite scenes in the movie. It's funny, don't get me wrong. Like, I more so actually laughed at the movie. It's kind of funny in an uncomfortable way too, but it's not the direction I saw this movie going, and I really don't like the direction. I guess it's only funny because Nicolas Cage is weird as fuck. I genuinely didn't know Nicolas Cage was in the movie until this exact moment, though. When he's being questioned and Lee comes in and questions him, I figured out instantly, like, is this Nicolas Cage? Just based off of his voice.
There she is, the almost birthday girl. And bow down, bow all the way down, and get right down.
There's so much stuff put on his face to change the way he looks that I couldn't even tell based off of his mannerisms. Really awful character. He went from like mysterious and scary to like painfully cringe. I think this movie could have been a lot better if they left Longlegs out of it entirely and there was nobody playing Longlegs, other than maybe the intro. That was kind of cool. So, yeah, Lee goes down and talks to him, and he ends up just smashing his face into the desk and killing... Oh, I don't know if I can say that. And hurting himself badly enough to where he's no longer with us. Doesn't give very many answers between that. The lead detective is very pissed pissed off at Lee for letting him do that. And we learned that the little girl that they talked to at the psych ward also jumped off of a roof and hurt herself. That's like the last bit of investigation that we get in this movie. It ends with us figuring out who the killer is, and yeah, we have all these like bits and pieces and mystery to put together. Then we instantly figure out who he is, and it's like, oh, that sucks. There is a little twist after this, but it's not good. Let's talk about it. Nearing the end of the movie, they decide to wrap it up with a giant exposition dump with a bunch of shots from the past of Lee and her mom growing up. So this exposition dump includes a past saying like, oh, what Longlegs would do is he'd go and bring these dolls that look like little girls to their house and somehow like infect their minds through these dolls and have that like sacrifice them to Satan, right? Well, Lee and her mother were one of the victims to it, but Lee's mother decided to go ahead and strike a deal with the so-called proverbial devil, and now she works for Longlegs. So Lee's mother, to save her daughter and herself, she decided to start working with Longlegs and helping him out. It turns out that Lee's mom has been dressing up as a nun and pretending like these dolls are from the church and going and giving them out to families. Like Longlegs just makes the dolls and Lee's mom goes and gives them to the people. Just watches it unfolds and walks out. Now Lee doesn't know about any of this, but Longlegs told her to ask her mom if she wanted to figure out what was going on. So she goes home, has another FBI agent take her to her house. Lee looks around, doesn't find her mom inside, and hears a noise in the backyard. When she goes back there, we see Lee's mom aiming a shotgun at a doll that looks just like Lee that she would have gotten as a kid. When she gets there, Lee's mom just blows the head off of the doll, and we see this black smoke come out. I don't know where the black smoke comes from. I guess it's like a demon thing. Demonic stuff. After hearing the shotgun blast in the backyard, or before, I don't remember, the FBI lady comes and looks for Lee, and Lee's mom just shoots her in the head, too. This is kind of when we're like, oh shit, Lee's mom's like actually a really bad guy. We then get a flashback to when Longlegs came to their house, and we see him giving them the doll, and like we get like a lot of the backstory right then. We get another long exposition break from the mom. She kind of like, all of these exposition breaks are just kind of like broken up between different scenes. It's a pretty big chunk of the movie just trying to explain it. I can't believe they actually like opted out of doing any of this through like scenes and dialogue, but instead decided to give us an exposition dump. That's probably the most disappointing part of this movie, other than the fact that the story got really dumb and we saw Longlegs. There's like no mystery to actually solve. It's just like, oh, I'm at a bus stop and now I'm getting arrested. Thanks for all that lead up for the last 50 minutes. This goes on when the mom like knocks Lee out. Lee chases her down, and she goes to the lead detective's house, and guess what? Lee's mom is giving their daughter a doll. She must be born on the 14th. So at this birthday party, Lee's mom's there. The family's acting really, really strange. Lee's trying to stop this, but the father and the mother go to supposedly cut the birthday cake, but the dad just ends up killing the mother. He comes out and is getting ready to kill the daughter. When Lee stops him and kills him, her mom gets really pissed off and decides to try to kill Lee, but Lee kills her own mother. And she saves the daughter. That's kind of the end of the movie. I wish they didn't explain everything throughout, like, just exposition to where it's kind of a person talking to us, not another character. I know that the runtime of this movie would have been a really, really long, like, would have been very long, if not, but just write a better story. Oh yeah, the basement where Longlegs was working throughout the film is actually Lee's mom's basement. He's just been living underneath them all this time. That's how they signed the deal with the devil. He also got to stay there. Probably fucking on Lee's mom, too, who knows. The mom of the movie, Lee's mom, did play, like, she was pretty good. I like the way that she acts in this. She's pretty creepy and believable. I like her. The halftime slide of this movie just really, really kills me because it felt so promising from the beginning. I thought this movie is going to be really, really good. That first half. I did a video on The Strangers, and I talk about that movie as if it's a tale of two halves, where the first half is excellent, the second half really sucks. This movie doesn't so much really suck in the second half, but it's so disappointing compared to the first half. I thought I was about to watch horror movie of the year, and I got just kind of a mid experience. Writing about the movie, even though I was very sour after first watching it, I think I've warmed up to a little bit more after writing about it and talking about it here. I wish the movie would have tried to continue that route of slow burn horror. It wasn't actually that scary when I think about it. I thought it was going to get scarier in that second half, and it never really got scary. So that slow burn never really paid off. Probably rate this movie like a 5.5 out of 10, maybe a 6. I don't know if it's a 6, though. This movie is a little tough. I think my expectations were very high because I heard a lot of really good things about this movie, and I heard a lot of bad things. And usually when a movie's super polarizing and it gets bad reviews from half of people and really good from the other half, and I notice it's a slow burn movie, I assume a lot of people that don't like it are people who don't like good movies that are slow. They're just like kind of like those Marvel Avengers kind of people. That was not the case. I don't really know what else to say, though. Longlegs, very disappointing. Not the worst, though. If you haven't seen it still, you should check it out and see what you think about it. There's no big mystery to solve in it, so it's not like I'm spoiling something that where like, oh, the reveal is the big part. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, drop me a like and subscribe to the channel. We're back and we're going to be posting a lot more horror movies. It took me a little while to find something that I wanted to post about in the recent times because there's not very many good horror movies coming out. I'll see you guys in the next one though. Peace out.